It's force cube time again, but this time, instead of making them out of 3x3s, pyraminxes, scubes, or even megaminxes, we're going to be using something a little bit more exotic, the classic 3x3 shape mod, the Mastermorphix. Now since this puzzle has 4 sides, that means we're going to need 4 of them to make force cubes. So I went ahead and bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them? I'll explain later. For the time being though, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the time lapse. Alright, that actually took a lot less time than I was expecting, which is good because now I have more time to talk about them. It turns out that Morphixes don't have a lot of pieces, especially compared to, say, a Megaminx. And speaking of the Megaminx, these were the last force cubes that I made, and so if you're still at all confused about what a force cube is or why you'd want to make one, definitely go check that video out because I explain a bit of the history about force cubes in there. But just like last time, I was thinking, you know what? I really enjoy making force cubes. The process of taking them apart and putting them back together in a different order, plus making a cool time lapse, plus you guys seem to really enjoy it too. And so I was looking through my collection, trying to think of an interesting new puzzle to make them out of, and what popped out at me was the Mastermorphix. So here we are now. It's definitely a unique puzzle to work with, and I would say a good choice if you want something really easy to make force cubes out of. For one, you only need 4 cubes for the 4 different colors, which is the least of any type of force cube that you can make, and they're pretty cheap to begin with. 2, it doesn't require nearly as much taking apart and putting back together of the individual pieces as, say, a 3x3 would, because most of the pieces are already single colored. All the edges and half the corners. So all you have to deal with are the centers and half the corners, which are both very easy to take apart and swap the colors around, at least on the Morphix, and that leads us straight into the third reason, which is you don't have to unscrew any of the screws. On something like a 3x3, the centers themselves, which are screwed straight into the core, usually match the color of the center caps above them, and so to make a perfect force cube, you have to unscrew all the center pieces on all the cubes and screw them all back in, which was especially terrible with the 12-sided Megaminxes. But on Morphixes, because each center from the factory comes with 2 different colored center caps attached, they basically just throw some random colored centerpiece in there and expect you to deal with it. And so I think about 70% of the centers that came in these Morphixes were all green. You'd think it'd be about 1/4 of each color, but nope, they just had a lot of green ones. And so like inside this red one, all the centerpieces are actually green. But the bright side of that is that you never have to deal with unscrewing anything. You just pop the center caps off and put them back on a different cube. So overall, the Morphixes are a very easy puzzle to make force cubes out of. Anyway, I think that was the first time I actually touched one of these since I finished making them. And so I think it's finally time to stop teasing you and actually do some first turns. So they turn, and it looks exactly the same after you've turned them. Well, okay, that's not exactly true because the Morphixes, unlike any other cube I've ever made force cubes out of, actually shapeshift. So if we go ahead and do this, we can actually scramble these up, which is actually a really cool concept because, as you may know, most of my force cubes just end up unstickered and useless forever, whereas these things will also remain unstickered, but they're actually kind of useful because you can still scramble and solve them. In effect, they're really just a slightly easier version of the Morphix, which I think is really cool. The green one is definitely my favorite because all the centerpieces are also green, and so it looks really nice and consistent. Anyway, I think the one big question that remains is, why the heck did I buy 5 Mastermorphixes to make 4 force cubes, especially since I already had one to begin with? Well, the thing is, if we go ahead and quickly line up my collection of Morphixes from 2x2 all the way up to 8x8 with the 3x3 in there, you might notice that this one looks a little bit strange, and that's because the colors are totally wrong. Sometime between 2015 and now, Shengshou presumably changed the color scheme on the Morphixes, and so now I'm going to take the very first one out of this collection, the Mastermorphix, and I'm kicking it out. I'm going to replace it with this brand new Morphix right here. This one is identical to the ones that I made the force cubes out of, so it has the new updated brighter shades, and this is now my new official Mastermorphix in my collection. So now they all match, which makes me very happy. Except for the fact that they don't actually match. I mean, these ones are frosted plastic and the rest of them are smooth plastic, which is really annoying. Also, the 5x5 is shaped a lot differently than the rest of them. But I guess I can look past that for Shengshou making such amazing puzzles. And oh, that reminds me. There's also one more Morphix from Shengshou in this box here. It is going to be the biggest Morphix of all time, probably my hardest puzzle in my collection, so stay tuned for that and be sure and subscribe because you don't want to miss it. Anyway, as for today, that is just about it. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see more force cubes like this in the future, and I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time.